What's up, Lighthouse Church? This is the Wednesday Q&A of our ShapeCast, and we are so excited that you're here. And we want to show you
gifts from Megan Budd, our director of operations at Lighthouse Church.
They all have front pockets, which I refer to as a frocket.
Oh, goodness gracious. A frocket? Don't say that fast. Please, God. It's a kangaroo pouch.
Yeah.
It's so you can keep things for some reason.
Why are we wearing these, Josh?
So at Lighthouse Church, we want to do everything we can to be frugal and smart and wise and prudent. And so the heat is off in the building at Lighthouse Church.
And it is frigid.
It's actually super strange. Our building, it used to be an ice rink, so it makes sense. It keeps in the cold and keeps out the hot. Mm-hmm. And it's 63 degrees out today, but it's 54 in our building. So we're frocking it. I needed to make sure I said that correctly. Whew, could have got flagged on YouTube for something inappropriate. So, so we're wearing these. These were gifts from our everybody's boss, Megan Budd.
Megan Budd, she makes the world go round.
These are warm fuzzies, and we were given warm fuzzies as notes. So we had to write out to all of our staff and everybody who works for our church an encouraging word, and to give them an encouraging word for their body, they got a warm fuzzy. So we're wearing them today in Q&A.
Okay.
That was a weird sentence?
Yeah. It's okay.
Oh,
anyways, so the heartbeat behind Q&A is we just want to have space where you guys can send in questions specifically to ask Josh. That can be about theology. That could be about circumstances. That could be about what does your everyday look like.
My wife sent in the question, why is your wife so hot?
She's going to hate you for saying that.
Brienne Shaw
who knows,
posted a question and said, why is your wife so hot? And wanted us to just answer it as if it was like some stranger. I'm not answering that question.
Creative.
I'm not answering that question of why my wife is so hot.
She's funny and hot. And it doesn't matter. No answer.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, you got a good one. You got a good one.
Marrying up, man. It's great.
You absolutely did.
Yes. That's
cool. So
I'm freezing.
So we're just going to ask a couple of questions. And Josh, these are mainly life questions today, if you're ready for that.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
This one, we're going to start a little bit more intentional, and then we'll broaden to more fun. Sound good?
Sounds fantastic.
So question number one that I think a lot of people who are new to Lighthouse Church, even those that have been around for a while, like you don't preach on this a lot, or it's like hasn't been integrated a ton. So I would like you to share how you became a Christian. Like, what is your story of following Jesus?
I think I've shared it twice in the life of our church, so it's not often. Mm-hmm. I'll make this story quick. When I was a senior in high school, I was going to a church that needed a drummer for hire. And some churches that are larger just pay musicians to play. Mm-hmm. And so I was in a death metal band, drumming. I had black hair and, and then I wore chick pants. I was goth and emo and all of those things. And so the church needed a drummer, and I guess I was a great choice for Christian music. I don't know. So I started going to the church, but I was coming in every Sunday, like hungover from parties the night before and all these kinds of things. And there was a guy, the youth pastor at this church. His name was Jamin Jackson. He started bringing me into his home, and he had a really awesome story where he ran away from home when he was 16. His best friend in his life when he was 16 was a girl, and she got pregnant, but it was not his kid. Okay. So she got pregnant by this guy, and then he bailed, and so Jamin went, I can't let you be alone. Mm-hmm. And so when he was 16 years old, he said, I will be your husband. I will take care of you. Well, his mom and dad were like, absolutely not. And then he went, absolutely. Mm. And so he ran away from home.
Wow.
Married her illegally. So they did a wedding ceremony in their living room with their friend. They pressed play on their friend's parents' wedding video.
Ceremony.
They literally they'd press play on the VHS, and then their friend would do what the preacher did for them in their living room. And so for 2 years, they were not married. That's how they got married. And then they legally got married.
When they turned 18?
When they turned 18. So that's his story. So I'm like this 18-year-old punk kid, and I think every Christian's an idiot, and I think every church is just phony, and I'm just playing for the money. And this guy comes around and tells me that story, and I was like, dude, you are insane. And like I just thought he was the coolest guy on the planet. So he started inviting me to his house, getting to know his kids, his family. He ended up having 2 other daughters. So he has three beautiful. They're not young women now. They're married and have kids, which is crazy to me. But started bringing me around, and then he started like all of a sudden about a year in, started inviting me to this camp in Woodland Park, Colorado called Camp Elam. And he kept saying, hey, let's go out for like the weekend and let's serve in the kitchen together. And I was like, dude, I just want to hang out with you. Absolutely. So I'd like call off work and go in and play. Like, or go in and cook and work the kitchen and work these 14-hour days. And he always told me like, man, like Christian girls are really cute, bro. Like if you come, you might meet somebody. You know, that's kind of
the tactic of like every youth pastor
like,
ever.
There's chicks there. And it's like, there's chicks everywhere. There's 51% of the world is ladies, by the way. And so he started bringing me a lot. And then eventually a summer camp rolled around. So we did all that winter. I did these weekend retreats, and I would work the kitchen. And then summer camp came around. It was a week long, and he said, "Hey, you should come, but not as a worker. You should come as a student because you're graduated. But they'll still let you come if this is the end of your senior year and you're in between." And it can kind of be like your final senior year high school thing. And I was like, okay, I guess I could. And he's like, no, I'll be the cabin lead. We'll have 10 guys in the room and I'll be your leader. And I was like, oh, for sure. So he paid my way to go.
Cool.
I think it was like $500 or $600. And when I went, I'd been in a church for a little bit, but not long enough to really know anything about Jesus or hear much about the gospel. And while I was at the camp on Thursday night camp, it's always like the altar call night, every camp on the planet, right? It's like everybody's exhausted. They're like tired. They're like, if you want to receive Jesus and be inspired with a new health and vibrancy in life, raise your hand. And every kid's like, yes, I'm so tired. So anyways, there's a guy who is preaching. He's a pastor in Denver still to this day. I think he knows that he led me to Christ, but he was preaching about the gospel. And I had never heard the gospel actually clarified that Jesus wanted me. So I had heard you're a sinner and you need to get your junk in order. And I was like, I mean, like life is pretty good. My family's a wreck, but I'm still having fun, you know? But hearing there's more to life and then that more is Jesus and he wants to live that life with me. My prayer was not a sinner's prayer. I just said, if you're real, I'm all in.
Yeah.
So I prayed that prayer, came home, told my mom, I said, hey, I think I'm in with Jesus. And she was like, oh, okay. And then from there, I really didn't know what to do. So I stopped going to that church because I was like, well, if I was playing at that church and I never really heard the gospel, I should probably go somewhere that like talks about this gospel I just heard, right? So I actually just started going to a church in the Springs called Calvary, and they just preached through the Bible. I ended up becoming a worship pastor or worship leader for the youth ministry as a brand new Christian. So I'm like, I'm sitting in the youth room, like literally the youth pastor is preaching to youth, 6th graders. I am 19 years old. And I am learning for the very first time about David and Goliath. Literally. Yeah. I had never heard the story of David and Goliath. I did not know why people would say things like, oh, you got to slay those giants. And I'd just be like, what? Slay? It's the Lord of the Rings? What are we talking? Like I had no frame of reference. So I actually learned about David and Saul and Goliath and a couple other books of the Bible they'd studied for a year and a half. I was at that church. I learned about all of that when I was in a middle school youth group. And that was my first formative years as being a Christian. So pretty crazy. And then I preached my first time there at that church, and it was horrible. Really? I said in a 25-minute sermon like 118 times.
It happens. What happens? You have improved, and that doesn't matter.
So many ums.
And then after graduation from high school, you wanted to go to Christian university, right?
Well, yeah, actually, I didn't. I actually wanted to save all my friends. So I became a Christian, was in all these bands, and I was in a motorcycle club. So I raced motorcycles. I was in a touring band, and in touring, I mean, like we did like local shows, but we like were all around like the state and stuff, and we were opening up for some pretty big bands, which was kind of cool. But I'd promised God that if He saved me, then I wanted to save my friends, and I wanted to save my brother, and I wanted to save my family, and so I stuck around in Colorado for that year and a half while I was at that church, and I was like, I have to learn how to save my friends. And so a year and a half went by and none of my friends got saved.
Okay.
And I was really angry because I had never led someone to Jesus. And I thought that was kind of like the epitome of all spiritual experience. You have to, if you're not making disciples, how are you making disciples, you know, kind of things. And I was just like, I don't know what to do. I didn't even know how to pray or read my Bible, which is why when we launched Masterclass, one of the very first things, one of the classes we'll have for Masterclass, and hopefully it comes out in April or May of this year, is how do you read the Bible? Because it's like some people just don't even know how to do it. How do you pray? So many people don't know how to do that. So I didn't know how to do anything. And so a year and a half went by and I gave God an ultimatum. So I went on a motorcycle ride with a friend of mine down to Bishop's Castle down in it's like south of BV.
Bishop's Castle.
Have you ever been there?
Yeah.
If you haven't been to, well, you can't go now, but you know, when
all this is over.
Yeah, so you go to Bishop's Castle. We drove down to Bishop's Castle on our crotch rockets, and we stopped in Pueblo on our way back. And my goal was if I could save my friends, and I won't say his name, but my goal was if I could save him, I can then also save he could save his girlfriend. That was kind of like my
There's a trickle effect. Yeah.
And I said, if I can save him, I'll stay. But if I can't, then I need to learn about Jesus because I'm not understanding. Because in my mind, Jesus should be the most persuasive human on the planet. And the gospel should be the greatest news on the planet. And people should be longing for that good news.
Like
and
once
it's on
they hear it,
and some people will think it's foolishness, just like Paul says. The Apostle Paul says that to the Greeks it's foolish, or to the Greeks it's foolishness, I think, and then to the Jews it's, or something to that effect. He just basically says some people will reject it. So I went to share the gospel with them. And my friend had no idea what I was talking about. I had no idea how to articulate what God had done in my life. I also did not know what sanctification was, so I was still living the life I used to live, but said I love Jesus. And I didn't know that wasn't wrong,
right?
Or wasn't right.
Wrong. Yeah,
I didn't know that. I thought as long as I confessed my sins, God would keep forgiving me. But I kept feeling more sinful and more, and I was like, "What is this?"
You're more aware of it.
The Spirit of God was sanctifying me, and so more things that were of the world were becoming repulsive to me, and yet I didn't know why. So I tried to share the gospel with him, and it was like, "Oh, okay," and that was it. And then so I left. I got home, I put my motorcycle on Craigslist. I applied for a college out in Kansas, got accepted, and then within so that was in July. So I applied, sold my motorcycle, got accepted, and within a week and a half from all of that, I was in Kansas
at a Christian
University.
To learn more.
Yeah, because I was like, I need to know Jesus. Yeah,
cool.
So
that's awesome. So when in that line did you decide? Or maybe, I don't know if that's the right verbiage. Did you desire to become a pastor?
Never.
Or work in ministry? So what's that? What was that?
That was accidental. Process? I think what happened was when I was in college, I found myself, I led my first friend to Jesus. His name was A, is what we called him. And I told this at Lighthouse. I kept on telling him, like, you got to become a follower of Jesus, bro. Like, when's this going to happen? So that was like my freshman or sophomore year of college, and I led him to Christ. And it was the most addictive experience of my entire, like, I literally led a guy who had never, ever heard the gospel. And I led him to not only believe the gospel, but to be filled with the Spirit of God. He received the gift of tongues when I prayed over him. It was a very Book of Acts moment. Became the most addictive thing that I've ever experienced in my entire life. I baptized him a couple weeks later on our school's campus. We got in trouble for that pretty bad. We should have baptized him in the church, is what they said. And I think what happened over the next 3 years, so I ended up personally leading about 115 guys to Christ over the course of 2 or 3 years.
That's cool.
It was, I think I've told stories about this at Lighthouse, but our college campus was going through revival, and it was not just me. There was a friend of mine, Aaron Garza, Ryan Lowen, Brianne Shaw, Brianne Green, who's now my wife, Brianne Shaw. There were about 7 of us that were we were like,
on fire.
We have to share the gospel. We have to pray for healing and miracles and for the kingdom of God to prove itself. And so, I was just one of many. There was this young lady at our, she was an African-American chick from Texas, and she was an evangelist. I mean, if I led 100 guys to Christ over 3 years, she was leading hundreds of women to Jesus every year. I mean, it was like the volleyball team had no chance. Like, it was like she just was like running in, slaying people with the gospel. And her father's a pastor. She actually is married to a pastor now. Cool. I mean, amazing things. So I think in the midst of being in college and becoming so addicted to salvation, I started naturally preaching because the groups would go from in one-on-one to bigger. And then, I'm doing a Bible study, and all of a sudden that men's Bible study turned into 70, 80 guys. And you're just like, oh crap, like things are happening. And, I'm loving studying the Word of God. And at that time I was business and marketing. And then a pastor friend was like, you should consider ministry. And I was like, nah. I do not want to be a youth pastor, bro. Because I thought that's what you're supposed to do. And so, it took a while before I think by the time my senior year rolled around, I really came to the realization that the most kingdom impact I could have was probably not going to be in a vocation that was outside of the local church. I felt like the gifting that was slowly beginning to percolate in me was most appropriate in a church setting. Cool. And so I think that's kind of just how I fell into it. But as you know, my passions are wide and broad. So like, it's not like I didn't go into college going, I will be a pastor. Right, I ended up falling into it because I simply saw what the church could look like. And I was like,
I want that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why would I not want to see people's eternity changed every single day? Like, what? Like, that's crazy, and I've seen healings. I've seen actual physical healings, supernatural healings take place. I've seen it. And it's all happened in the confines of some sort of formative church-looking thing. And I know it can happen in restaurants, and I know it can happen in other businesses. But for me, I felt like that's where I'm meant to be.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that kind of leads into our second question, which is, if you were not a pastor, like the what if question. If you're not a pastor, what would be your dream job? I guess. Like, what else would you want to do? All the while. Yeah. Bringing the gospel. We'll claim that.
Yeah. But of course.
Also, where else do your passions lie?
I've got goofy dreams. So I've always had a dream of owning a food truck.
What kind of food?
Oh, ramen.
Only ramen.
Ramen, Japanese, Korean, Hawaiian.
Why is your Snuggie not as annoying as mine? Sorry.
Because I'm not as annoying. So that was drums, by the way. So I would definitely. I love food. Food brings people together. Ethnic food, in particular, absolutely brings people together. Americans suck at eating. we are not good. Well, our food is not communal. So
like all the fast food and
no. Think about actual meals that you grew up eating. Are they communal?
You mean like family style, like pass around the plate? No, that's just not our culture.
Right, that's not our culture, but it's everybody else's culture. Like, that's like, I love cultural food because it's shareable. It's it comes from the same pot. It's from you're meant to eat it together. You're slurping together. You're eating from the same pizza. You're all, you're sharing the same bottle of wine. You're doing, I love. Like, America has made every other culture's food better. And before someone's like, oh, no, that's not true. Yes, it is. I've traveled almost everywhere besides Africa. But I've eaten African food, and when it's here, it's amazing. We make food great. The problem is that we revoke all the communal aspects of what makes that food great.
Interesting.
So I love food, and I love what food brings to people, which is joy and laughter and being around a table. I'm a very big fan at my family. When I cook, I don't know if you've noticed this at my house. When Brienne cooks, everybody eats everywhere. When I cook, we all sit down and we talk and we engage and and I want to ask how the food is because I want to make sure that I'm honoring my guests well with good food and I'm nourishing them. And they're like, man, this was thank you for this, dude. Like, this would have cost me $50 if I went somewhere. So I'd own a food truck, and I'd probably park it outside of a brewery. Okay. And I would sell ramen and Hawaiian food just because I love ramen and I all that kind of stuff.
Do you have a name?
The Shaman Ramen House.
Shaman Ramen. There you go.
So the shaman is kind of like a weird, goofy, like religious, like they're like the shaman has like words of wisdom, right? And my last name is Shaw, so the Shaman Ramen House. I think that'd be super fun.
That's good. Okay.
And then I have another dream, which is I have a dream. So I want to be a stand-up comedian.
Okay.
And that's something that I actually am actively working on writing material for. One of these days, love to be a comedian. Just kind of opening for acts here in Colorado, I think would be a blast. And then being an author, which I am an author already. I've written 2 nonfiction books, but I'd love to be a published fiction author.
Cool.
So it's really weird. The dreams that I have don't actually fight against what I believe to be kind of like my primary vocation. Like I believe that God has gifted me with a unique ability to preach the word of God and to be a visionary leader for a local church that's on like the front lines of creativity. And yet I have other passions that I desperately want to tap into that I don't think are in competition at all with what I love. And so for me, chances are in the next 15 years, I will own a food truck, or I'll be like renting space at a seasonal like eatery somewhere. Yeah. And I probably will be opening for comedians and sharing the love of Jesus with guys and gals, backstage at, Comedy Works downtown. And I probably will be a dystopian sci-fi author. I'll probably be all those things. And yet behind the scenes, like know that my primary vocational desire, it's kind of like Jesus he wasn't a carpenter. He was a man who worked with his hands. And some people actually think that he might have actually worked with stone. It's like you make money, you pay the bills, you do things that you know that you're good at, but then you do things that you know you were made for. And I think I want to do all of those. So
cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Sweet.
Shaman Ramen House.
Shaman Ramen, it's coming.
If anybody wants to write me a $20,000 check for a food truck, that would be the thing.
First, write a check for heating in our building so we don't have to write.
Oh, come on. Yeah, we're good.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for sending in questions. Keep on sending questions. You can send them to any of our Instagram, Facebook,
the YouTube,
you can send that to, or email at care@lighthousechurch.tv. If you have questions for Josh, like I said, across the spectrum, whatever comes to mind, if that's about the Bible, if that's about who he is as a person, his heart behind Lighthouse Church, what God is doing in his life, whatever it might be, send them in. We will ask just a couple each week so that you guys get to hear from him a little bit more.
Awesome. Yeah, it's fun. Great.
So we love you guys. We will see you soon. Continue to check out the content that Lighthouse is pushing out because we are still a community and we are still doing life together, even though it looks different.
That's right.
So we'll see you,
love you guys
around more.
Yeah.
Bye.